Hello everyone, welcome. Thank you very much for coming to the open seminar series of UCL CVT, the UCL Center for Blockchain Technologies. We used to call it the online open series of seminars, but it's not online anymore because we started this during the pandemic. We got a huge reception and we decided to continue doing that. And now there's no need for it to be online anymore. But people are still interested in attending online, so maybe we are going to call it the hybrid open center series or just the open center series. We had about 20 seminars in the past 3 years, and we hope to continue this way. Hope to maintain your interest. And today we're having a very interesting seminar on stablecoins by Enrico Rossi. Dr. Enrico Rossi is a research fellow at the computer science department, also a research associate at the UCL Center for Blockchain Technologies, and a lecturer at the computer science department. So without further ado, I'm going to be super quick and just give you the floor. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ron, and good to see you here. I know we are splitting between online and physical, but it's nice to be physically here in presence. We were supposed to have this meeting actually in July, but I wanted to postpone it and excited to be here. So yeah, we are going to talk about stablecoin today. I actually just came back a couple of hours ago from Cambridge, where I had a meeting on crypto assets. So I think it is going to be quite topical. This is what I've been discussing for the past few days, and I'm pretty sure, hopefully, it's going to be topical and interesting as well. So let me just Okay, so this is the agenda. So this presentation comes from a draft paper, which is actually almost a draft book because it's quite long, actually. And you can see, while doing the presentation, I was realizing that you can actually see the presentation, and actually the paper is broken down into 3 main parts. Okay, so beside the background, where I'm going to give you basically a highlight of why I developed an interest in this topic and what I'm trying to do. Then there are going to be 3 main blocks, okay, which are the relationship between stablecoins and crypto assets, the relationship between stablecoins and any other financial assets, and then trying to bring everything together and develop a model, which is my own model, to actually try not only to provide a taxonomy of stablecoins, which is different from the standard taxonomies, but also to provide a taxonomy of crypto assets in general, which is consistent with my taxonomies of stablecoins. Okay, so you will see that as we move on, and then we will conclude. Okay, no, wait a second. I will try to. Yeah, just yeah, exactly. Okay, that's what I do. Thank you very much. Yeah, works. Thank you very much. Okay. Very good. So okay. So why stablecoins? So obviously everyone is talking about stablecoins recently. It is becoming a very hot topic. Now, just as a background, there are 3 main reasons why stablecoins are becoming a big topic. One, first and foremost, I would say central bank digital currencies. With central bank digital currencies, a lot of blog posts and papers on the Bank for International Settlements and the IMF coming out, basically claiming stablecoins are great, but actually the only way in which we can make stablecoins operational is actually to operationalize it into central bank digital currencies. There are many architectures and solutions for CBDCs. There are no single solution, no single architecture, but basically you can see central bank digital currencies as a form of stablecoins. It differs whether it's retail or wholesale, but basically it is a stable coin in the sense that it's a tokenized asset which is actually pegged and backed by some fiat currencies, which is issued by the central bank. Okay. The second reason why they are extremely important is because of decentralized finance. It's actually the third row there. For a simple reason that, okay, decentralized finance is a very big chapter, but a lot of business models in decentralized finance, whether it's lending and borrowing, whether it's actually yield aggregation or or any other type of DeFi business model, actually they heavily use stablecoins, okay? Because what stablecoins actually do is to provide some form of anchor on chain through which you can either do some lending and borrowing, or you can actually do some transactions between tokens on chain, right? Because the point is that without actually a stable anchor, it would be extremely difficult to either do a temporal postponement of values, such as in the case of lending, or to actually do a transaction between two assets on chain. It would be a little bit more convenient to actually pass through an intermediary. Okay, so stablecoins are actually addressing that issue. And then there is the big issue of private global stablecoins, which was extremely topical a year ago when Facebook, tried to develop either Libra and Ethereum. But these are technically also stablecoins. Okay, obviously the nature of Libra is different from the nature of Ethereum. We started as a as a form of private money, then Facebook was actually reproached by regulators. Then it actually created a stablecoin, which is actually the outcome of a basket of currencies, but so on and so forth. So these are all forms of stablecoins. Obviously, these are DeFi, CBDCs. They are becoming extremely topical, and the whole topic of stablecoins as a result. Okay, so this is really a background. So usually stable coins are treated within broader taxonomies of crypto assets. Okay, so whether you look at the FCA, the SEC, FINMA, or other regulatory authorities, or the MiCA, the European Commission MiCA, basically you will see that stable coins are a type of crypto assets beside a bunch of other crypto assets. Okay, I try to highlight them all here. Not all regulatory frameworks define all these crypto assets. Okay, so it's definitely an overlapping list, an exhaustive list, which may differ according to the regulatory authority. But the point is that stablecoins are usually treated as a separate crypto asset. Okay, separate from liquidity tokens, separate from security tokens, separate from payment tokens. Here I use the FCA distinction between exchange tokens and e-money tokens, which I like particularly, as I will also discuss later on. Basically, e-money tokens are issued and exchange tokens are minted, are mined. Okay, so usually this is how the FCA distinguishes. So there is a question that we may ask. So aren't all these token securities though, right? As Gensler said a couple of days ago. There is this problem, right? So how we are going to distinguish these various types of tokens? Maybe someone wants just to treat them all as securities. You solve the issue, and it's an easy regulatory path from there on. Okay. So maybe there is not even any need to distinguish these tokens. Plus, there is a lot of confusion. Now, here I put three extracts from the US Trust Act, the FCA, Crypto Taxonomy, and the MiCA, so the European Commission Taxonomy. Look at that. So the term for the US Trust Act, the term security does not include a payment stablecoin. So they clearly distinguish between stablecoin and securities. For the FCA, not every stablecoin will meet the definition of e-money or a security token, so there may be an overlap, but we don't know. The MiCA regulation does not apply to crypto assets that qualify as electronic money deposits and securitization. Okay, so for the MiCA, basically the stable coins, so basically asset reference token, as they're called, they are different from electronic money and securitization. So basically, a big mess in the sense there is inconsistencies between the guidelines, the regulatory taxonomies between agencies. Okay. So, having said that, what are the problems that actually push me to actually go this way? First problem: stablecoin is an internal heterogeneous category. It's not a consistent category. We will discuss it later. Stablecoins are usually defined as assets that are pegged to some external unit of value. However, within stablecoins, there are a bunch of crypto assets which are maybe very different. Okay, so it's not a homogeneous category. Secondly, stablecoin definitions usually focus on the peg. So basically, once again, the way in which regulatory authorities usually define stablecoins is some form of crypto asset that is pegged to some other asset. However, when you look at standard distinctions between stablecoins, you will look that the peg disappears, and classification of stablecoins are not made according to the peg, but according to the backing or reserve. Okay, so clearly there is a peg there. There is a reserve or backing, and there is no clarity of the role that each of these two dimensions are really playing. Okay. Third, which is what I said before, usual taxonomies, no matter whether it's a US taxonomy, a European taxonomy, an FCA taxonomy, a Swiss taxonomy, they're not mutually exclusive, which is a big problem whenever you want to develop a taxonomy, in the sense that you may have security tokens, which are also stable coins, you may have e-money tokens, which are also securities and sometimes also stable coins, and so on and so forth, right? So I was not persuaded by this taxonomy for all these three reasons. Okay, I find current crypto taxonomies pretty flawed and pretty problematic for these reasons. This is just a recap of what I said. By the way, all the tables that you will see are basically a screenshot from the white paper that you can find on SSR. Okay, so yeah. So what is the framework that I'm trying to develop here? It is a framework that starts from the realization that we've got three layers here. We've got the stable coins, we've got the crypto assets in general, and then we've got the standard financial assets or financial tools, okay? And the problem is that these three things are usually disconnected and often conflictual, okay? So you may have a categorization in the definition of stablecoins, which has nothing to do with standard taxonomies of crypto assets, because of what I just said before. And very often these two things have nothing to do with the way in which standard financial assets are defined. Okay, you can have crypto securities, but the point is that there is a disconnection. Very often, regulatory authorities develop ad hoc definitions or ad hoc taxonomies to address specific crypto assets. Okay, so there is a disconnection between the three areas. And so what I've been trying to do is, okay, we've got all these problems. Let's try to start from scratch. And let's try to see whether we can come up with some taxonomies of crypto assets where stablecoins is not just a non-mutually exclusive single category, but naturally comes out of the taxonomy of crypto assets, and where we don't use ad hoc definitions, but we actually derive definitions of crypto assets from underlying primitives that can also be used to define standard financial assets or financial instruments, okay? So in a sense, develop a framework that brings all these three things together and provide a coherent and univocal framework that is not overlapping, that is mutually exclusive, that is consistent and not conflictual, and so on and so forth, right? The problems that I illustrated before. So basically, what I'm trying to do right now is to see how each of these three elements can be developed in a way that at the end of the day, we can have a framework that I call the TPR framework that addresses the goal that I've been trying to develop in the past months, okay? So the first thing that I decided to treat is the relationship between stablecoins and crypto assets. Now, in this section, I will very briefly discuss how stablecoins are defined nowadays, and I will also show you why there are problems, okay? So the usual way in which stablecoins have been introduced and have been discussed is through the Council of Money. And here we introduce the Council of Money, which is going to play a big role actually in the framework. And what I identified are three approaches, okay, through which the relationship between stablecoins and money can be used to understand the relation, how stablecoins should be treated, okay? So there is one one position that basically says no cryptocurrency can be as money, no matter whether they are stable coins or not. Stable coins, even though they exist, they are not stable anymore. Okay, so there are no stable coins whatsoever. Stable coins are just, an artificial thing that it cannot be implemented. The second position is there are certain cryptocurrencies that can be post-stable coins, and these are the cryptocurrencies that actually are stable with respect to the peg, which is the mainstream definition of stablecoin as we know it. And the third, which is what I'm trying to really do, is to show how even the second approach, which is the standard approach to define stable coins, in a sense, even that either limited or partial, because it doesn't really capture the way in which money and the stability of money can actually be conceptualized. Okay, and through that, I'm going to develop then the definition of stable coins. So with respect to the first, these three approaches to stablecoin, it is necessary to go back to the three functions of money very briefly. Okay, so the three functions of money are unit of account, store of value, and fungible means of exchange. The important thing to realize here is that these three functions of money have been developed throughout the history of economic thought as in three different ways and in three different temporal periods. Okay, so there are some interpretation of value that mainly looks at value of money as commensurate unit of account. Some other interpretations that looks at money as a store of value. Some other interpretations that looks at money mainly as a functional and efficient means of exchange. Okay, this is an important thing that we have to understand. And then there are these three things, these three functions of money that can be mapped into three nature of exchange value. Okay. So usually when we discuss fiat money, we tend to think of money as incorporating all three functions. The important thing is these are three functions of money that not necessarily has to be completed into one. That's the core concept that I'm going to use later on. So money can also fulfill certain functions and other functions be left for some other assets. Okay, so think, for example, about commodity-backed money. You've got a token, which is your money, okay, your banknote. It fulfills the exchange, the means of exchange function. It fulfills the unit of account function, but the store value function is actually fulfilled by gold or by some precious material, which is externalized, okay, which is external to the actual monetary system. Okay, so these are the three functions that then I'm going to use for the framework that have to be. It's important to recap. Okay. So going back to the three positions that I mentioned before, there is a position that says no matter what, no cryptocurrencies is money because all these three functions of money will not apply to cryptocurrencies. And I will not pause here, but there are a variety of, there is a reference that you cannot see, but there are a variety of, even authorities that claim that, okay? And so this is the old, let's say 2018, 2019 way to understand crypto assets in functional money. Then there is a second, there are two problems here, okay, with this simplistic approach. First of all, it treats cryptocurrency as a generic concept, okay? And secondly, it treats money and value as a generic concept, okay? So this interpretation will be debunked by the fact that it doesn't ask what type of money we are talking about and what type of cryptocurrency we are talking about, and will actually generate the second approach to crypto assets and money, which is let's try to break down the three functions of money and let's try to map each function of money into different crypto tokens, okay? Which is another exercise that I did. And the result is this one, right? So you take the three functions of money and somehow you can map the three functions of money to three different tokens. So for instance, The unit of account function of money can be fulfilled by layer one native tokens, such as Bitcoin or Ethereum and so on and so forth, for the simple reason that you can measure fees with that, you can measure incentives, you can usually measures all economic variables on chain. So technically, this can be, or gas for Ethereum, this can be a unit of account. Okay. Usually, these units of accounts are extremely inefficient means of exchange. So usually, the most efficient means of exchange over a blockchain is an electronically issued e-money. Okay, such as a privately issued stablecoin, which can act as a means of exchange. However, it's never a unit of account itself. Okay, because it usually relies on other units of accounts, and it's very rarely store of value, right? For the store of value, the stablecoin category comes in. Okay, so usually the way in which, so long story short, the way in which the stablecoin concept has been introduced into a discussion of cryptocurrencies is, as we all know, to address the store of value problem, usually. Okay, so you've got stablecoin here, you've got e-money there, you've got exchange token there. Then you can have security tokens, utility tokens, and technically, which are more refined financial tools or non-financial tools at all, such as utility tokens. And technically, you've got the standard taxonomy of tokens, which is actually derived from the three functions of money. Okay, this is not how regulatory authorities derive taxonomies of crypto assets. That's my way to derive it, but I think that it actually works, right? So you can actually generate this mapping. Technically, that's just these are the features and the properties that these different tokens mainly addresses on food fields, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. Okay. So even this way to derive tokens from the three functions of money and to usually define taxonomy of tokens, in a sense, is flow. And the flows are exactly what I mentioned already before. Okay. Usually, these types of tokens are internally heterogeneous, so they're not homogeneous internally. And before I was mentioning that just for stablecoin, but this can be extended to any category. Okay, so take for instance exchange tokens, right? So layer one native tokens. Some exchange tokens have been defined as securities, at least by the SEC, such as XRP, Ripple, which has an open fight against but others that have been clearly defined not as securities, right? So some exchange tokens are securities, maybe some others definitely are not. So there is no coherent treatment there, right? Once again, multidimensionality. Some assets capture multiple functions of value. Think about, for instance, exchange tokens that can also act as efficient means of payments, such as SOL, for instance, or any protocol or any even permission protocols that actually have as a underlying native tokens that can actually also act as efficient means of exchange. Right? Others not. Or what about, for instance, you've got stable coins such as DAI that can be used as legal tenders, right? So as recognized unit of account, for instance, as a native gaming token, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that there is no one-to-one mapping really, right? The different token categories can actually fulfill different functions of value. And as I said before, they're not mutually exclusive, okay? There is an unclear relationship between these different categories of tokens really, okay? Because once again, you may have some securities that are stable coins, you may have some exchange tokens that are securities, and so on and so forth, okay? So they are overlapping. So this is basically these are basically the problems that standard taxonomies have, even beside taxonomies of stablecoins. Okay. Secondly, and I go back to what I said before, whenever we try to understand whether certain tokens or certain cryptocurrencies are fulfilling the functions of money, we usually forget that the three dimensions of value, and therefore the three functions of money, can actually be unbundled and recombined. And we saw it while studying the history, basically, of monetary economics, that there have been different schools, each understanding money and value in different ways, whether the accent is on unit of account, store of value, and so on and so forth. Okay. So the other thing that I realized that had to be pointed out is not just about the three flows that I already discussed, so internally heterogeneous, non-mutually exclusive, what was internally heterogeneous, non-mutually exclusive, and multidimensional, but also whenever we try to discuss the value of a token, we tend to forget that the dimensions of value, the one that I showed before, are like Lego blocks, okay? They can be recombined accordingly, okay? You can actually take two and one out and so on and so forth, okay? So based on that, so not all money is fiat money, okay? Based on that, I realized that we could use stable coins, actually, to reconceptualize value on chain for crypto assets, and through that to actually link crypto assets to standard financial instruments, which is the triangle that I showed you originally. Okay, and this is how I decided to proceed. So stable coins are usually defined as assets that are pegged to a certain unit of value, which is technically this linkage here, which is usually how stable coins are defined. However, taxonomy of stable coins are usually based on the nature of the reserve or backing. Okay, so you define stable coins as a standalone assets looking at the relationship between VP and VT, and then you distinguish among stable coins looking at the relationship between VP and VR. Okay. And so basically there are three elements here. There is one element that is the peg, there is the other element which is actually the token, the stablecoin token, okay? And there is the other element which is the reserve, if the stablecoin is collateralized, otherwise it's just the backing mechanism, okay? This has to be out. So technically, all three relationships between these three elements can fluctuate, okay? So if these three are three independent dimensions, therefore, you've got three different ways in which you can understand how these three elements move according with respect to each other. Okay. And once you've got these three, let's say, degrees of freedom, then you can highlight a market risk, which is basically the decoupling that you've got between the peg and the token following trading on the market. Okay. You can have a decoupling which occurs between the reserve and the peg following some depreciation of the reserve, okay? And you've got another decoupling, which is not there, but it's there, which occurs between the value of the reserve and the actual value of the token, okay? Now, these are like three different risks, in a sense. One is market risk, so the risks deriving from, trading activities and markets which may not be liquid and may fail, in a sense. You may have counterpart risk, which derives from the fact that whoever owns the collateral or whoever operates the backing mechanism actually creates some glitch and therefore depreciates the token with respect to the collateral or appreciated that, maybe because of information asymmetry, maybe because of anything, okay? And then you may have the liquidity risk that are mainly deriving from the fact that the reserve can usually lose value, okay? Can depreciate with respect to the peg. Usually, when you study algorithmic stablecoins, these two mechanisms are usually distinguished between demand side conditions and supply side conditions. They actually require different remedies, which I'm not going into that. But usually the demand side problems are the easiest to address because usually arbitrage on the market will actually resolve the problem. While supply side conditions are a little bit more tricky, they actually would require an increase or reduction of supply. They would actually require some dual token. They would actually require some mechanism that ensures actually the balance there. Okay, and then I introduced my own architectural technological condition, which is the one that actually is addressing counterparty risk. Okay, so it actually looks at, you know, where the collateral is, how the backing mechanism works. So as you can see here, there is no univocal understanding of stability or volatility. Okay, so stability and volatility can depend on many dimensions, but especially stability and volatility is with respect to the peg, but the peg itself not necessarily is an absolute source of stability, right? So the peg itself can actually fluctuate, okay, with respect to something else, obviously. And so the two normal, I call it bidimensional cases that are usually discussed in the literature on stablecoins are one case that I call absolute stability, which is the peg is the absolute reference of value, it never fluctuates. Okay, and you've got some stable coins that actually try to assume a peg that never fluctuates, such as FRAX, okay, which is usually pegged to stable consumer price indexes, for instance. Or you've got another bidimensional case, which doesn't address the fluctuation of the peg, but it addresses the other mechanisms, so the fluctuation of the reserve with respect to the peg, that I call intrinsic stability, which derives from the fact that pegs and reserve are the same. So in that case, they conflate, they collapse into each other. So in that case, the only source of risk in my head is the counterparty risk, okay? It's the other that is left out. And usually this is the case of tokenized assets or on-chain tokenized assets, such as RAP tokens, and so on and so forth. You can kind of see this distinction as a distinction between e-money and asset reference token if you go back to the MiCA, so to the European Commission guidelines. That's my own thing. I don't guarantee that they perfectly match, but they kind of do, okay? So, having said that, we have got these three elements, which is the token, the peg, and the reserve. In the paper, you can find an extensive discussion of these three elements that then we will use I will use in the framework, in my framework. We don't have really time to go into that, but whenever you discuss the tokens, there are all these things that you can check whenever discussing the tokens. How it is issued or created, the type of claims against the issuer, claims against the reserve, and so on and so forth. The type of redemption rights can be by law redeemable, it can be trust-based, it can be redeemable because of protocol lines, and so on and so forth. Okay, so there are a bunch of things that you want to look at. Sorry. This is a screenshot from the paper that you can see, it's open access. This is my own taxonomy of the peg. I distinguish the peg into, I break down pegs into two dimensions, okay? The measurement or the nomination function that actually looks at whether the peg is itself the ultimate unit of account in a sense. And the other is the evaluation function that actually looks at whether the peg is the ultimate stable store of value or not. Okay, so then you, with this 2x2 matrix, which I tried to develop, you can actually see what fits where. Okay, but this would actually require a little bit of a longer discussion. Same thing for the backing mechanism. I developed this 2x2 matrix, which distinguishes between where the backing is on-chain or off-chain, okay? And whether the backing is collateralized or non-collateralized, which you can also find in other publications. But usually, this matrix is my matrix, okay? Okay, so we basically arrived at the core table here, which is having a mapping, a one-to-one mapping between the three elements of the stablecoin and the three dimensions of value, which is really what I wanted to achieve at the end of the day. Okay, so what I claim is that the token is really the means of exchange, the actual token that is transacted. The peg is the unit of account because it's what actually you can measure magnitudes with and what you can use to actually measure stability or volatility, okay? So it's a measurement issue. And the reserve is the store of value, okay? Or support value, okay? So I just overlap the 3 dimensions of value with the 3 dimensions of stablecoin. This is what I've done here, okay? Once that we achieve that, given that value can be used as the primitive and the 3 dimensions of value can be used as the primitive, then I use this table to actually fulfill the triangle, right? So to actually provide a taxonomy of crypto assets, which is also a taxonomy of stablecoins, which is perfectly consistent with the taxonomy of financial assets in general, okay? And this is really the essence of what I call the TPR model that highlights 3 main categories. Financial assets where the token, the peg, and the reserves collapse into one single entity. Financial assets, no matter whether they're crypto assets or not, whether you've got 2 dimensions that are fulfilled by one entity and 1 dimension that is fulfilled by a separate entity. And then you've got a case where the 3 dimensions are actually fulfilled by 3 different entities. Okay. Obviously, in that case, you've got 3 cases. So basically, you've got 5 overall cases in general. Okay. So once that you do that, and that's really the last slide before the conclusions, you come up with 5 cases. You find a super exhaustive table in the paper if you want to have a look at it. Extensively discussed as well. Where you've got the monodimensional conflation of the 3 dimensions, which is usually standard fiat money. Okay, so money that are at the same time means of exchange, store of value, unit of account. So basically M0 in a sense, central bank fiat money, which in the case of crypto assets can only be fulfilled in the case of layer 1 native currencies that are, however, efficient means of exchange and are also legal tender that actually, are stable intrinsically. Okay, so layer 1 cryptocurrencies under certain circumstances are the only case that can fulfill the case of fiat money. Okay, then you've got the first bidimensional case, which is where you've got token and peg that are conflated into one, and the actual reserve that is separate, which is the case of commodity-backed money, usually. Okay, so you've got, as we said before, you've got the token. It is a unit of account, but the backing is separate. It can either be, usually gold or precious material. Okay. In that case, you've got. In that case, you can actually do the transposition of this kind of money into what I call platform native money. Okay, which are discussed. We can discuss it later. But are basically the equivalent of commodity-backed money on chain. The third case is TPR. So you've got token and peg that are conflated, but you've got this is not TPR. Sorry, it's the conflation of backing and token. Sorry about that. So it's a PRP. Okay, PR together and P separate. Okay, which are usually off-chain in normal circumstances a peg legal tender, which I claim is the equivalent of algorithmic stablecoins. Okay, and we can discuss it later, the details. Then you've got the other case, which are peg currencies or securitized assets, which is the case of tokenized assets, the standard case of tokenized assets or tokenized securities. So a case where you've got the peg and the reserve that are bundled together. Okay. But the token that you use is actually separate, okay? So this is the standard case where you've got a stable coin that you transact, and then you've got a reserve and a peg that is something else, but they are the same thing, okay? Tokenization of assets, really. And then you've got the case of standard crypto collateralized stablecoins. So usually, for instance, DAI, for those of you who know what that is, which is a token, which is, for instance, DAI, which is pegged to something such as the US dollar, but collateralized by something else, such as Ether. Okay? So standard crypto collateralized stablecoins would be here, algorithmic stablecoins would be there, And tokenized assets, which are the three main categories of stablecoins that we find in the literature, will be here. And the other two will mainly be cryptocurrencies that will behave as a certain type of money, either fiat or commodity-like money, depending on whether they are PPR or PP/R. Okay. So this table actually summarizes everything. It has a wealth of examples, and it basically maps the various stable coins and the various crypto assets into that. It's just an extensive in-depth recap of what I just said, really. Okay, so I'm not going to go into details, but at the end of the day, the conclusions are, we can discuss it later, the details. I think that with this framework, basically, we can address all three problems that I highlighted at the beginning. Okay, so keep consistency between crypto assets, stablecoins, and financial instruments. Having mutually exclusive categories, because the combination of PP and R generate mutually exclusive cases. And actually generate classes which are internally consistent, okay? You don't have to break down these classes into heterogeneous and completely different types of financial assets or crypto assets, okay? And so if you really want to focus on stable coins, this is actually, and this is the last slide, this is actually stable coin would look like, okay? So tokenized assets, as I said before, would mainly be fitting the T/PR case, okay? Collateralized, decentralized stable coins, such as DAI, as I said, would mainly fit the TPR. Uncollateralized algorithmic stable coins such as Frax, okay, or Ampliford, and so on and so forth, because you can have stable coins which are totally algorithmic, so non-collateralized at all, mainly fit the fourth category. And free floating stable coins, because you also have that, such as OM. So stable coins that are actually free to float, even though they are bad, okay, would actually fit that category. Now, last but not least, once that you do that, based on the model that I developed, as a regulator, as a policymaker, you can understand what the stable coins are. So you can understand that tokenized assets, technically, if this is true, they would actually have to be treated as crypto securities, okay, mainly as crypto securities. Decentralized, collateralized, decentralized stable coins should mainly be treated as crypto derivatives, because derivatives are the only thing that I can think of and that I found that actually fulfill the TPR all separate case, okay? Uncollateralized algorithm stable coins would actually be crypto derivatives or digital backed currencies. The distinction there derives from the fact that it depends on how you define it, but we didn't go into the details. And the free floating stable coins are either digital crypto commodities or crypto IOUs, basically, which is in fact, it is basically consistent with a home white paper that actually tried to develop a stable coin that resembles, a central bank issued money, right? So it is also consistent. This framework at the end of the day is also consistent with what these projects claim to be as well, okay? So that is a perfect alignment. I finished, that's the last slide, but I just want to conclude that the power of that thing is that through a primitive of value, the power of this model, through a primitive of value, so the three dimensions of value, you can actually define standard financial instruments, and through that, you can actually understand how to treat crypto assets. And you don't need the distinction between stable coins and other crypto assets. You don't need the standard distinctions between crypto assets that you are used to see in official policy or regulatory documents, because this framework actually generates a different taxonomy based on other premises, which is really what I wanted to achieve. Okay? And that's really the last one, yes.
I just want to thank everyone for attending, and also note we have had an average of 50 online attendees at the time of this presentation, which is pretty amazing. I'm very happy. I also want to let the online attendees know that we are getting your questions. So we are opening a quick Q&A. So if people in the audience have any questions, I'm also going to display the questions from the audience online on the screen.
Have you spoken to any regulators? Yes, I mean, I mean, not exactly about that, but my plan is, let's put it like that. My plan is to put this forward because I have ongoing discussions. So let's put it like that. But no, we haven't really developed a discussion specifically on that sitting down on the paper. So in that case, the answer is no. Specifically. Also, this is very new because I put it out on late June, so it's summer. Yeah.
Maybe one question on liquid staking tokens. Would you say you could put it in this application because it's to take SE, for example, it's pegged to E, it's stable relative to E. There's a reserve, which is that E token. Fit it somewhere in this or
well, yeah, I mean, okay. So if the reserve is ETH and the tag is ETH, then that would definitely be a tokenized asset, right? So now that you were speaking, however, I also realize another thing, right? So that what regulators do in order to regulate stuff is to look at activities and risks as well, right? Which I mentioned before when I was discussing stablecoins. So this is why I was saying this is almost nearly booked, right? So it's impossible to actually go into all the details in an hour. But it's true that this framework, then when you try to see how E, P, and R are linked, then you should go back to how risks emerge, which is the other slide of risk that I showed you, and try to see whether it makes sense that something is classified in a certain way, also according to the risk, right? Because usually the way in which you regulate is the same risks and regulation, in a sense. But in that case, I don't care whether it's it's staking on chain, because I would still treat it as a tokenized asset. The problem is that you usually understand tokenized asset with the collateral which is off chain, but you can have an on-chain tokenization, right? Same thing for wrap tokens, right? Wrap coins. So you've got an on-chain collateral with an on-chain tag, and that's an on-chain tokenization. Technically, it is, right? Because you are tokenizing an asset on a platform of an asset that it belongs to another platform. So it's an asset tokenization between two platforms. So same thing for your question.
So there's a question there. What do you mean by exchange tokens? It would be a theoretical concept, as I understand it. Since there is no on-chain yet, there's no on-chain yet in the distributed ledger industry.
Yeah, now for exchange tokens, I use the term as the FCA uses the term. So the FCA is not super specific, but the way in which it implicitly uses the concept of exchange token is native one, layer one native cryptos. Okay, so technically tokens that can be used as means of exchange that are, however, they are linked. Okay, so they are mined with the blocks, okay, with the linking of blocks or with the consensus protocol. Let's put it like that. So these are payment tokens that are, however, not issued by a centralized authority. That's how the FCA defines exchange tokens, and that's how I'm using the definition.
There was another question asking for the link to the paper. I have sent it, so the online audience should be able to see it. But if anyone from the in-person audience would like to see that, we are, it's on SSRI.
A couple of questions. Firstly, shouldn't you have a further dimension in your variety of tokenized assets? Because Stablecoin, Gemini coin was regulated, the rest of them is not. So that's not a dimension.
So Gemini and Tether, what did you say?
It's Gemini coin and dollar coin are regulated in euros, so they're not regulated in general. Whereas you could argue that Tether is completely unregulated. That is the dimension you need to add.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, okay, so I don't know what you mean for adding the dimension, but what I would say to that is, so Tether would be, Tether technically should be a tokenized asset, right? So you basically it's tokenized token, right? So in that case, The problem becomes, given that it's a tokenized dollar, which is there, okay? It is either, so depending on how you define it, it can be a crypto and zero, so a crypto fiat, basically, which should be regulated accordingly. So the problem is how much collateral are you taking for that, right? So are you collateralizing one-to-one, okay? Which is what I would suggest, okay? Yeah. Therefore, not regulated better as Tether the organization as a bank, which in that case would also keep collaterals that are not necessarily one-to-one. They would actually have to be consistent with, you know, Mars and other regulatory frameworks. So in that case, I would just treat Tether in that case, and yes, they should be, I mean, they should fall within the regulatory framework, of course. So the fact that it's not regulated is potentially a big problem, which may be right, because there are even the redemption is not sure in Tether, you know, like there is no guarantee of how much really you can.
Fundamentally, they even report to themselves that in their reserve, they are including debts that other people owe them.
Yeah, and that's
the systemic risk versus some of the other points I mentioned.
I mean, there is clearly an asymmetry, but the point is that as far as I'm concerned, if these things behave in the same way, in the sense that they fit the same box here, and going back to my taxonomies that I jumped or I went through extremely quickly, all back to, right? So the two by two taxonomy, and they actually share the same square in there, right? Because some can be as that centralized off-chain collateralized, okay? But some others may not be, right? So in that case, also there is a difference because the risk profile in that case would also be different, because in one case we have many counterparty risks, but if it's on-chain, you may have rather than counterparty risks, such as for pools, you might have, you know, some technology risk, which is more prominent, you know? So even in that case, that would still fall in that line there, but also the reason why I presented the taxonomies of back token and backing is also because you can use those to actually refine those categories, right? So yeah, so.
Good question. This is not directly related to the presentation today, but I am interested in your view. You think in a few years' time we'll still be talking about stablecoins, because obviously there's been mentions of central bank, which will take some time. But ultimately, I am imagining that those coins will replace these vendor coins, if you like. Take a little bit of a step back to think why they're existing first. It's largely an inability to pass dollars around.
Yeah. So I definitely think that there are many use cases in which some concept of stablecoin will still be there. Absolutely. I mean, I can go back to my first stable. I definitely think that gaming, the whole gaming galaxy, which is now starting to evaluate, you know, using stablecoin as a form of, you know, money ongoing money for various business models. That would be a use case that I see in the future. Even in case of private global stablecoins, just what, you know, Libra used to be, there was a big regulatory problem there because it was early or mid-annual, but I still feel that this kind of use case will be there for sure, and central bank digital currencies as well. So really going back to, you know, to the three type of categories that I mentioned at the beginning. With respect to DeFi, so the use of stablecoins in DeFi, yes, as well. I think it will be there. I think it will probably be much more certainly much more regulated. are within the regulatory scope and perimeter, why not?
We just have 2 minutes left, perhaps.
These are the
These are
outstanding
the
questions.
unanswered questions. We have had to write them all.
So anonymous attendee first, and well, the point is, okay, here I went, so according to this classification, we can assume that there is not a sovereign digital currency that fulfills all three, so unit of account, unit of exchange. I mean, the answer is it depends. Okay, so because if I go back to what I said before, the problem of digital currencies is that in order to be store of value, they have to be stable, of course. In order to be efficient means of exchange, they have to have very low finality period. They have to be scalable, and they have to, be able to settle transactions extremely quickly, and they have to be able to be exchanged frictionlessly, no question asked, and so on and so forth. And with respect to the unit of account, you have to be able to use that to, purchase things, reward services, and purchase goods, right? And price goods. So the point is, if you've got a platform, right, where you can actually do these things, and with respect to this unit of account means, you pay fees, you pay taxes, and you buy goods in that unit of account, which for layer one currencies may kind of exist, at least fees and some form of economies can be priced in that currency. If you've got this same currency, which is extremely scalable and have extremely low finality period and can be accepted, no question asked, with very low transaction cost. And if this digital currency, being its own unit of account, doesn't need to, is also subject to inflation or deflation, but it doesn't affect prices of the things transacted on chain due to the fact that it is fluctuating with respect to something else, right? Then in that case, yes, you may have a single platform where you can have a sovereign digital currency, okay? The problem is that the adoption will be limited to that platform, so limited to that economy in the same way in which, within an economy you've got a currency, and within another economy you've got another currency. And the problem is that all these properties will have to be fulfilled. Okay, so obviously, if the digital currency is, for instance, operates in a permission manner, it will be extremely more efficient. So it is more likely that it will probably be sovereign digital currencies. And if it actually fuels an economy flourishing over the top, either a service economy or even a good economy, then it has more chances actually to behave as unit of account, right? And so on and so forth. Means of exchange is the easiest one, in a sense, right? So it really depends on the features of this currency. But the whole point is that there is a distinction between the performance of the underlying protocol, the boundaries and the scope of the underlying protocol, and the characteristics of the asset. So really, the answer is it depends. It depends on all this kind of stuff. So the second question, make your DAO move to gradually back from USD to gradually back to Ether. Do you think this is margin increasing regulatory pressure? And lastly, would respect to Ether work and not end up collapsing like Luna? Okay, the last question, would collapse? I don't know. I mean, it will require a longer answer that we probably don't have the time for. But okay, so with respect to the first part of the question, yes. So okay, so whenever you move, so from one token to another token, you actually are going to change the nature of the reserve, of course, right? So the reserve and the peg. So basically, what happens is that if this is a separate entity, it would still remain in my framework within the same box, of course. what may change is the risk profile, right? What may change is the risk profile, and what may change is the fact that you are now pegged into something that is also changing the relationship between backing and pegging, right? So for instance, MakerDAO is, so DAI is backed by, let's say, Ether, right? So if DAI that is backed by Ether is going to be pegged to Ether as well, for instance, okay? Suddenly you're shifting the nature of that stablecoin from a standard crypto collateralized stablecoins, which is backed by something to something and backed by something else, to an actual tokenized asset, right? So I'm not sure exactly what the question here refers to. MakerDAO move to the peg from USD. Well, the pegging from the dollar, yes. So in that case, it would generate what I just said, right? It would generate a shift from the second line of this table to the first line, right? Because in that case, Ether would be both back, wizard, and back, right? And so it would change the line, it would change the way in which DAI should be understood, and therefore change the risk profile, and therefore technically also change the regulatory in theory, right? So the whole point is that I'm trying to say here, once again, thanks for the question, is not just the reserve or the backing that matters to regulate stablecoin, which is what I said before, is usually interesting regulators, okay? So they're usually doing a ranking of stablecoin based on what the backing is. But it's actually the relationship between the peg and the backing. It's not just the backing, it's actually their relationship. So changing the peg changes also the relationship between peg and backing, and therefore it would imply different risk profiles and different, classifications and different technical also regulatory framework as well. So yeah, I don't know whether I answered this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for time today. So we appreciate it. I would also really appreciate, I want to express the appreciation of the center to all of you who attended, to all the online attendees as well. I take the opportunity to let you know that close to the end of the year, on the 1st and 2nd of December, we're organizing a workshop, the P2P Financial Systems Workshop, where one of the key themes is stablecoins. So if you're interested, this is a great opportunity. Well, just once again, thank you very much. I don't know if you have any other words. I'm going to stop recording now.